So good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to year one of working in UX. My name is John Morton, and tonight we're going to talk with three newly minted UX UI professionals who are in the first year of their role, their first role, that is. One thing that's a little different about this panel tonight is there's no corporate sponsor or other organization promoting this event, so you can put your wallet away. I've been doing freelance art and design for several years, but like many of you, I'm also seeking that first full-time UX position. And I noticed there were lots of panels on how to land jobs, but there were few, if any, that followed up on what it's like those first few months in UX, especially if you're a career transitioner. So that's kind of why we put this all together. Behind the scenes tonight is Megan Riley, who is helping to admit people to the room. She'll be taking questions in the chat. And coincidentally, her first day at her first UX role starts tomorrow. So I will let Megan chime in a little here.
Thanks, John. Yeah, the timing is quite perfect for this panel. So no pressure to our panelists, Chase, Summer, and Diana. I'll be listening very closely. But I'm Megan Riley. I'll be helping co-host. I'll be answering stuff in the chat and hopefully sending some links as well. And so a little bit about me. Yes, I was hired recently. I'll be starting tomorrow, and I'm a Design Lab alum. I started back in September 2021, same cohort as Chase. So we have all started and finished Design Lab at like sort of different times. So I'm eager to hear everybody's story. So take it away, John.
Okay, so our three guests tonight are Summer Hannon, Diana Nguyen, and Chase Starr-Kercheval. I'll have Megan drop their LinkedIn profiles in the chat momentarily if you'd like to connect with them later. We have some great questions that were submitted by all of you who registered tonight. It was tough to cut things down. We know we're going to have kind of a tight schedule. Maybe there's room to take extra questions at the end. We'll kind of see how everything goes. We are recording this, so you should receive an email sometime after the event with a link to the recording. Might not be tonight, might be tomorrow. So let's just get started, since we're anticipating some interesting answers to some interesting questions. We're going to start with Summer tonight. So Summer, if you could start off by telling us a little about where you work, when you started, and what kind of role you have there.
Sure. So hi, everyone. As John mentioned, my name is Summer. I work for a large software company called Tyler Technologies, or Tyler for short. We are one of the leading software development companies focused on the public sector space. So the area that I work in specifically is the Courts and Justice Division at Tyler. So I am currently designing solutions for courts and law enforcement agencies, which is really interesting. I started my role at actually Halloween of last year. So I've been there for about just under 8 months, if my math is correct. But yeah, my job title is Associate UX Designer, and I am primarily responsible for designing the product. I do pair with a UX researcher on different projects, and they handle the initial research and the testing, which I might jump in on, but I'm primarily responsible for the design piece.
And Summer, are you the sole designer there, or do you report with another designer to a project manager, or what's that look like?
Yeah, so I'm the sole designer on my specific project, but my team consists of 2 designers, 2 researchers, and a UX manager. So we all report to our UX manager, and we each pair is assigned to a different project, but we do collaborate on a weekly basis.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that, Summer. We're going to go over to Diana next, and same question, if you can tell us where you work, when you started, and what kind of role you have there.
Sure thing, John. So I'm Diana. I'm based in New York City, and I currently work for the company Intersection as a UI designer. So what I So what Intersection does is they are an out-of-home advertisement and technology company. And I'm in their product development team where we work on creating tech that provides like user amenities, advertisement, and also transit information. And so on a weekly to day-to-day basis, I focus on creating a user interface for displaying transit information for various transportation agencies.
Great. And now in your role as the UI designer, are you working on that alone? Are you on a team?
So I am in a team of two. I work with the product director, and he basically is in charge of creating like the user interfaces, and I joined in to give a helping hand in that.
Okay, great. We're gonna kick it over to Chase now. And again, if you could kind of tell us, where you work, when you started, and what your role is there.
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name's Chase. Yeah, I work for a company called Midwestern Interactive. They are based in the sprawling metropolis of Joplin, Missouri, which most people probably haven't heard of unless you're familiar with the tornado that came through here a little over 10 years ago. Pretty small place right in the middle of the country. I am a UX researcher, and yeah, they have a little bit of a different business model than like a lot of other companies. We don't build anything like any products in-house. Midwestern is an embedded teams like talent provider. So what that means is we have developers, designers, and researchers in-house that will embed into existing teams in other companies. So it's what they call staff augmentation. So this allows companies to bring on additional talent, oftentimes for like short-term projects, knowing fully well that they need that extra help or expertise, but they may not have a place for that person on a full-time basis going forward. So in some ways, this is relevant to a lot of what we've seen with a lot of the layoffs and stuff. This type of business model is kind of helpful in that regard because they can bring someone in and not have to worry about whether they're going to have a permanent position for that person moving forward. So it's a little similar to like freelancing, but we're full-time employees for the company that we work for.
Okay, great. And you and I have talked a little bit about this before. You had kind of a non-traditional success story with your job. And if I remember, you didn't finish the boot camp all the way. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I can't necessarily recommend the path that I took, but it is an interesting one. So I technically have finished the boot camp now, kind of. I have my certificate, but that's because I did the auto graduate after I landed the job. So a bit of an unusual path there. I kind of got lucky in one way, and that being that living in Joplin, Missouri, the odds of there being a company that would hire someone working in UX felt pretty slim. Like I didn't qualify for like the tuition reimbursement guarantee through Design Lab because I just don't live in an area where there's companies that hire for that. So my experience getting this job was pretty unusual in other ways too, because like I had applied early on for a product designer position and didn't get it. And then like later on, I was in talks with them to come on as a researcher, and that fell through. So like long story short, there was like a lot of back and forth. And I guess there's a takeaway message for anybody that's watching. Don't give up on a company just because it didn't work the first time or the second time that you've tried to join. Don't hold it against them because there may be reasons that you're not aware of that kept that from happening. And eventually it did work out, and it's been really good for me. So I'm really glad that I stuck with it.
So don't burn any bridges and follow up regularly.
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, with our intros kind of done, we will kind of jump into the questions that our viewers have submitted. I did notice in the chat, as predicted, that people are demanding an appearance of Chase's dog, as featured in the title card earlier. So our first question: how does the reality of your role differ from your expectations going in, and were there any happy surprises? I'm going to pick on Summer to go first.
Cool. So I'm not sure if I had any set expectations going in. I was a career switcher myself. I knew I had an idea of kind of what UX was and the role was from a boot camp, but I kind of went in with a mentality of I'll know when I get into it. So I don't know if I had any like crazy expectations, but I will say one thing that I learned pretty quickly was how important soft skills and communication are. So much of my job, as I've come to learn, is less about the design. While yes, I can spend hours in Figma some weeks working on and concepting and designing and doing that piece of it. That's definitely a huge part of what I do. But it's so much more about collaborating and communicating with teams. And I've learned in my specific role, I tend to serve as a sort of balancing person between product, dev, and UX, and trying to meet in the middle. And so much of that involves communication and presenting and advocating for your decisions while also learning to work with others and figuring out how you can meet in the middle between those three pieces. And that is really a lot of what my job is, more so than even like the design piece.
Okay, cool. We'll go over to Diana with the same question. How does the reality differ from your expectations? And were there any happy surprises when you got there?
Sure thing. I am definitely piggybacking on what Summer said, which is developing your like interpersonal skills and soft skills while you are at your job. Because the one thing that I have noticed, so I did apply for a junior role, so this was a junior position going in. I kind of had this impression that, you know, they know that I'm a boot camp graduate. They know I'm a junior. They know like I was just jumping from a different industry. So I kind of just had this impression that, oh, someone's gonna really mentor me and hold my hand into this job and basically kind of like check everything I do. But the reality is when you go into these jobs, I am like the only UI, UX person there, like specifically for that role. And I think maybe the one with the formal training. So when I went in, I realized that a lot of people at the company is relying on my knowledge and my expertise to navigate things. And other people from like different departments, they might not understand how to articulate their wants and needs when they want like, you know, website or design done. So that's when your background as a UI or UX designer come in, and you have to be able to ask those specific questions, like, and basically define what exactly you're doing, because like other people, they don't know because they do rely on you to already know. And I think that is a plus in a way, because I learned quickly that your ideas and your decisions they trust you with it. Like that is the takeaway. Like they trust your expertise in it. And yeah, a lot. And at my company, the development team, they're very inclusive. So I do get to work with them very closely and just talk and just throw in ideas here and there. So that is like the one happy surprise that I found.
Okay, cool. Chase, we'll go ahead and throw that same question to you. Want me to repeat that? I realized we could be dropping these in the chat, and maybe that would help people stay on top.
No, I've got it. Yeah, I think
Okay.
I'm good. Yeah. So I think my answer is pretty similar. It was surprising how little like UX was known broadly throughout the company. And I sometimes, maybe this is a little bit related to what I just said about like the company that I work for and their business model. They were very developer oriented. I think the company I work for, the culture is much more similar to what you would find in like not like a super early stage startup, like a growing startup maybe. So I was a little bit surprised to find that like there wasn't that much like hardcore UX knowledge throughout. And like that is an opportunity. Like whenever you see that there, it's like, okay, I mean, you need to check yourself and not come in and act like you know more than you really do. But you very well may be the person in the room that does have the expertise that understands like the topics that are being discussed. So as a junior, it's both really intimidating to kind of step into a role. Like you're kind of expecting to just be at the bottom of the totem pole and not like kind of be just overshadowed like all the time. But then and that seems bad, but then you find yourself, it's like, okay, the thing that I was afraid of there isn't the issue at all. I'm not being overshadowed at all. Like I'm potentially being exposed here. Like I'm like being asked questions I don't know if I'm fully prepared for. So you got to kind of bootstrap it a little bit and, you know, have some confidence in yourself. And yeah, see it as an opportunity to be able to make an impact and kind of evangelize for your craft in that environment.
Okay, great. So you're kind of contributing to the future maturity of your UX program where you work is kind of the gist of that then.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. All right, our next question, we'll start with Diana for this one. Was there anything you encountered during the job that went against the grain of what you learned during boot camp?
Oh, yes. So what I found from Design Lab that actually really helped me was in terms of presentation skills and deliverables. Now that I'm working, I've realized that a lot of these things, not to insult people, but I do feel like we are way ahead when we have like proper presentation skills, because like when I see like the way things are presented at meetings and things, like not everything is as structured and not everything is focused on storytelling, which is something that is very heavily emphasized in UX, UI presentations. And the one thing that I did notice from my job is the way I learned in bootcamp, or the way that they taught us how to do work or just wanted us to do work, is everything was very structured and made sense, where you work on a screen, you get like a Figma file, you follow the user flow and you just design to it. But the reality is at the workforce is people don't really have any skills in teaching. Like not everybody has teaching skills. So there are times where you'll just be handed something and someone's like, all right, now make it into something else, but you don't really understand the structure. You don't understand the flow or the design system behind it. So you kind of have to, I guess, develop your interpersonal skills in order to find those answers so you can do your work efficiently. Like you need to like seek those things out yourself.
Okay, so you're finding your presentations are a little more fleshed out than what you than your peers at times.
Yeah, I think having formal like training on presentations and also the critiques really helped in being able to articulate your wants and needs and what you are looking for in feedback, especially because I realized that not everybody understands, like when you ask for feedback, you should specify exactly what you're looking for, so that way the other person gets a better sense of like how to answer it.
Okay. And we'll kick it over to Chase next. Same question. What have you encountered on the job that went against the grain of what you learned during boot camp?
Sure. So I got a couple of things. Try to not take too much time with this. First thing that I guess it didn't really go against the grain of what I learned in the boot camp, but like my role is in UX research. Like I don't work in Figma. I've like messed with, like, at least for my client work. I'm trying to get into more of a design role right now, but you know, none of the boot camps can really prepare you for that role, I don't think. There's just not enough time to go through everything that you really need to know to like be an effective researcher. because they need to cover so many different topics within a UX boot camp. If it was a UX research boot camp, maybe it would be a little bit different. So I did feel a little bit flat-footed coming in, like not fully prepared for what I was going to be dealing with. And there's just so many different things that can come at you in the research world, like so many different types of projects and methodologies that you can use. And so often you just need to know that like you need to have a vast toolkit and know which thing, like which methodology to apply in the right situation. You can't be a hammer going around looking for a nail. And I think that kind of ties into the other thing that I was going to mention, that I guess went counter to what I was thinking this was going to be like from the boot camp, which was, I guess I kind of expected like there to be more structure to things where, you know, whenever you're doing projects through the boot camp, you get a brief and it's just kind of described to you exactly what it is that you need to be doing. And you have a rubric, like there's this strict curriculum. And so often whenever you're like, at least from my experience, when you're working directly with a client, the most important thing that you can do is just to continue to dig for, like, in my case, like, what's the research question, you know, and they can tell you an answer. And even if it's intelligible, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have it like whittled down enough that you can actually use that to build a research study around. You need to continue digging and continue trying to understand what it is that they're trying to learn. Because if you haven't gotten to the core of that, then you could very well run off and build a research study that was well designed, but you had the wrong research question in mind in the first place. So you've got to get that alignment, and nobody's going to do that for you. It's your job to just make sure that you're aligned with your team and that you really understand what you're supposed to be doing.
Okay, thank you. Great answer. Summer, same question to you then.
Yeah, absolutely. And I apologize in advance if I cut out. My internet decided to be a little funky right when I need it the most. So I apologize if I just suddenly drop. But I think one thing that, I don't know if this is again necessarily against the grain, but one thing that I think was a little bit different, and again, more of a learning curve, was I feel like when going through boot camp, specifically the one design lab, the one that I went through, we're kind of taught about the design process in a very sort of linear fashion.
All right, we might have lost Summer. Do we lose her for good? Do we move on to the next question, or do we give it a second? Oh, there she is.
Am I back?
You're back.
Oh no.
We lost you at the word fashion. But you're back. You were back. Now you seem frozen again. How about this? We'll just kick it over to the next question. We'll start with Chase. We'll see if Summer's video or connection kind of comes back to us. Our next question from our viewers is, how did you structure your first 30, 60, 90 days?
Sure. So we have a structure in place at our company for like new employee onboarding. I mean, you can imagine it's very similar to like any job. You've got like training stuff that you need to do. You kind of need to drink the company Kool-Aid to like get acclimated, get like used to the culture and know the rules, know how they do things, like what to expect. So I think that's going to be pretty much across the board. But I think that it can vary quite a bit from like role to role. And my experience on this was a lot different than probably what other people is going to have, because like we're an embedded teams provider. So I didn't have a client to work for whenever I first came on. So I actually had, and this was a huge blessing for me, I had almost a month, I think, before like my first client, what we call an ETR. So I just, instead of waiting around, I kind of just jumped in knowing that like this may be the only opportunity that I got to really kind of like hone my skills. Is like time is of the essence. So I just started diving into everything that I could. So similar to the last answer I gave, not having a ton of experience with research like coming in, I just read everything that I could and did as much research as I could and started compiling resources and yeah, just sort of like trying to lay the groundwork as far in front of me as possible before I was in a situation where I really needed it.
Okay, great. Diana, same question. Your first 30, 60, 90 days.
Mhm. So actually, when I first joined during onboarding, my company did give me a little pamphlet on how they wanted to structure my 30, 60, 90 days. And the one important thing that was on there was a list of all the developers that is going to be on my team and work directly with. And the plan was that I and go ahead and meet all of them and just check them off my list. And I found that to be really helpful. Although the rest of it was like, because I work in advertising and transit, there's always something going on. We couldn't actually follow the other stuff, which is like the projects that they had in mind. So I ended up jumping around a lot and not actually following like the work structure, but definitely like the social and work relationship one, that was a really good way to just like arrange things. So outside of that, anybody that wasn't on the list but was also a developer or just someone that was just like around the office, I did make an effort to just like talk to them, get to know them, and just like send them a message on Slack like, hey, nice to meet you. I'm new. We should get lunch sometime. Just something very like casual just to get the ball rolling.
Okay, great. And Summer, same question about your first 30, 60, 90 days. Oh, did we lost Summer again? I think we lost Summer. All right, what's our next question? Actually, you know what? I will kick this to Diana because you kind of touched on this in your last answer. How do you cultivate good working relationships with developers? Is there anything that you did from the start? You kind of talked about just meeting them and going to lunch.
Yeah. So one thing about my company that I feel like is like that I just got really lucky with is the way they have it is an open office, so nobody is kind of cut off in rooms. We all just work in one big open space, and I sit right in the developer area itself. So it was just very easy, getting to know people in my desk area. So I would just kind of just like say hi to them every day, say, good night every time I leave, and take advantage of work happy hours and just like free work lunches or whatever events that's going on in your company, because that will be the downtime where everybody's just casual and social and just ready to mingle. Because I'll say when you are around engineers, they're usually in the zone. They usually have a lot on their plate, so they're not really down to just like have idle chit chat when they have like a million projects that they need to do. So just definitely like catch them at lunch, catch them, after work hours where it's like a more appropriate time to talk.
Okay. We'll toss that question over to Summer too. I don't know if you caught it, Summer. How do you cultivate good working relationships with developers? And is there something you did from the start?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question because my role at my current company, UX, is, as Chase had mentioned, similar. It's very new to our company. And so we're actually going through this right now where we're trying to learn how to work with devs and how devs are learning how to work with us. So we're kind of right in the middle of this, kind of figuring out what are some tools that we can use that help us kind of work together. And there are I had a couple thoughts that I'll walk through and hopefully won't take up too much time. But I think the very first one is to involve them early in your process. So for our particular team, we have devs involved right at the very beginning. So if we're starting a design sprint and we're talking through requirements or what the product team's visions are with scenarios. We have a dev representative there. We might not have every single developer there, but we have the manager there who is present, who is able to listen in and to sort of catch any sort of technical constraints early. And I think that really does help kind of throughout the entire process, because you can potentially avoid some barriers that would otherwise come up if you hadn't talked early. So definitely bringing them in early. Second piece that's really helped that we've started to implement is having an open line of communication outside of your regularly scheduled face-to-face meetings. So our particular company uses Teams, for example, but if you have Teams or Slack or whatever sort of group chat availability, we have a team that's specifically dedicated to communicating between UX and dev. We may have a product member in there once in a while, but we have that kind of open line of communication, and always just being available and ready to answer questions as needed has been really, really helpful to catch things early. The very last thing I'll mention really quick, and I'll kind of do a little bit of a plug here for a book that I highly recommend anybody in the field to read, but especially anybody newer who is trying to transition into the workspace. And that's Articulating Design Decisions by Tom Griever. I actually have it. It looks like it's got a little bird on it. This has been really, really helpful in kind of walking through ways to communicate your decisions with your team members. But I think one point that this author mentions.
Oh no. I feel like as soon as we switch gears, we're going to get Summer back, but maybe not. All right. So I also have the book here if anyone is looking for it. We'll try to get that question out of Summer later, and or the rest of the answer out of that later. Let's see. I lost my position because I wasn't expecting the video to stop. This next question, we're going to start with Diana. What set you apart from the other designers that interviewed for the position?
Definitely it was my previous experience. So I am coming in with so I worked in the video game industry before as a quality assurance tester. So I have QA experience, and not only that, but I have freelance as an artist in various projects. So it's the ability to collaborate, manage projects and deadlines, and definitely just have a background of like what it's like to work with developers. But you don't necessarily need those skills, I think, to set you apart. Another thing was there was this LinkedIn post, I think I'll find a link later, but it was like from this recruiter that posted basically like a checklist of how to prepare for an interview. So same deal, memorize like what the company does and how to sell yourself to it. And if you follow that, I think you will stand out, because they do look for people with genuine interest and genuine like just knowledge of what you are applying for. So I think that was also extremely helpful too.
Okay, great. Yeah, I will kind of second that, because I've had this hesitation where I didn't want to, because no one wants to do more work than they have to. I didn't want to tailor every resume to everything that I applied for, but I did this, I want to say Monday, to a job that a recruiter reached out to me. And before I sent my resume, I switched around all the words in there that matched their job descriptions and made it match a little more. And I heard back from them very quickly. So that's something I'm going to get to do more myself. And you kind of also talked about our next question. We'll toss this over to Chase then. How have skills from your past job transferred to your current position?
Yeah, so like a lot of people, I had a pretty diverse background of like work history before I came to UX. I've done a lot of different things. I don't have enough time to even list them all off right now, but a couple of things that really stood out to me. Like I worked at Starbucks as a barista for a long time. And I know that may sound weird that that's like the first thing I would go to, but that experience of like working with a team and like trying to like basically herd cats and like understanding like team dynamics and like the politics of like how things can work out. I think there's just a lot that you can learn there, and it's kind of approaching everything is like an opportunity to learn. Like in that position, that's really like I loved my job, but I knew that, I mean, I'm a barista, so it's like if you kind of think of it that way, then you're not really going to get anything out of it. But I really like learned a ton about like people and speaking with people, and as a researcher doing interviews and stuff, I think it's come in handy a lot because, you know, like whenever we have those interviews lined up, I don't know who really I'm going to be talking to that day. I have some basic information about them, but then I'm just jumping on a Zoom call with a random stranger. And I think having that customer service experience and like knowing how to handle just a random person walking up to your register has been really invaluable to me. And then on the flip side, like working with stakeholders and like people that like have like an outsized level of influence and like power over like your job and what you do can be really intimidating. And I had a job working in IT at a hospital, and I worked directly with like administration and physicians and stuff. And you know, you really just kind of learn to like keep your cool under pressure in those situations, because you can have like a really pissed off doctor, and there's not really much you can do for them in that situation. Like people have been way nicer in the UX field so far, but that definitely is something that has really helped me.
Okay, great. Looks like we got Summer back. Welcome back. We will shoot this question over to you. How have skills from your past job transferred to your current position?
Thanks. I'm on hotspot now, so I should be good to go. Gosh, of course, right when you need it the most. Yeah, so previously, before transitioning into UX, I actually worked in a medical behavioral field. So I worked in the field of behavior analysis. So I was working with a lot of individuals with different types of needs, and I was working on kind of creating those treatment programs based on those specific needs. So I think some of the biggest takeaways and skills I was able to transfer was really related to having empathy for users. I know that sounds silly, but having empathy to an understanding of different needs, and different needs come with different solutions, and being able to apply those skills directly. I think also at my previous job, I actually had some experience with data analysis. So that's partially why I continue to sit in on some prototype testing and research type of tasks, because I'm able to assist with that piece as well. So I think those were the two biggest things that I was able to take directly, but that might also be specific to the role that I had before.
Okay, great. Was there more you wanted to add on about the Articulating Design Decisions book before we get to our next question?
Oh, sure. If we want to revisit that real quick, I was like right before my final pitch. Yes. So I talked about that book a little bit. Where I left off, I believe, was the author, Tom Griever, talks in the book about how as UX designers, we learn to empathize with our users. But he talks about how it's also really important to empathize with our team members and our developers and product, and kind of remembering that they're humans too, which sounds really simple, sounds, when you think about it, but I think it does bring up a really great point that, they're humans too. They have their own ideas, their own timelines, deadlines, pressures, things that they're dealing with as well. And so I think it's important to remember to approach your conversations with your team members in a collaborative way as much as possible, especially when challenges arise, because they will.
Okay,
Yes,
great. We are doing really well on time here. We have one more prepared question. It's kind of a meaty question. This is one of my favorite of the user submitted questions. So after this, we'll see if we have maybe Megan will chime in with some questions she's been saving from the chat. Also, I was just curious before we continue, I know Chase and Diana are working in person. Are you also in person, Summer, or are you remote?
I am fully remote.
You are fully remote. Okay. And we'll let you lead off with this last question then. With the idea that the best is yet to come, what is stopping you from getting there, from getting your ideal kind of position in UX? What is the nut to crack to make 2023 your year?
Oh, that's a great question. And I love that you brought up the remote piece, because as much as I love working remote, I think there's definitely some barriers with not being in person with people. And I think one thing that I would really like to do in my career is really get into having opportunities to observe users in person and to test in person and to have that face-to-face interaction. Because as nice and convenient as remote work is, there is somewhat of a barrier there where you're not having that face-to-face sit-down conversation is so much different. And so I think I would really love to kind of work more in person with my team or another team when the opportunity arises, and really get some more hands-on kind of experience there.
Okay, very interesting. I didn't expect that at all. See, we'll kick it over to Diana next.
Sure. So guess the one big thing that's preventing me from making 2023 my year. Well, first of all, I think it's already my year since I got a job. But I think the valuable thing that I learned here is, despite how I've received formal education in UX and UI, and I've learned a lot of skills, it's completely different when you handle projects on your own in a boot camp versus implementing it all in a work environment. So because I am the only like UI UX person at my company, a lot of people are relying me to bring in that knowledge. And I'm finding that there are just some problems that right now I can see that they are problems, but I know I don't have the experience or expertise yet to know how to thoroughly solve them. So I think just spending more time and working at my job and just getting as much experience as I can is what I need to do.
Okay, continuing to climb that learning curve then.
Yes.
How about you, Chase?
Yeah, very interesting answer on that first one. Like, I find it surprising that anyone working fully remote would. Yeah, I mean, there definitely are advantages, like you said. Like, my role is in person. It's kind of a hybrid role. I can work from home sometimes, but yeah, I think that it does provide a lot of advantages on that front. It's hard to know exactly. I think I'm too early in my career. I haven't actually worked in this field in a fully remote position, so I might not be able to speak to that too much. But from my perspective, the thing that I think is like the biggest blocker on us being able to, I think about it more as a team, and like, how can we as a research operation and like as a design team, because we kind of work together, how can we kind of like take the next step? And part of the issue is just our business model. Working with a different client each time. A lot of clients don't have a very robust like research operation going. In fact, to this day, I have yet to actually plug into an existing like research operation. That's what it's supposed to be, but so far, the clients that I've worked with, it has been, here's what we want to learn, and like, what do you think? Like, how would you go about trying to do this? So instead of like plugging in and being like a junior researcher in like an existing larger team with like a framework, it's been more a matter of like trying to spin up a research operation from the ground up each time. And I think that that's really challenging. Like, now that I've been through it a few times, it's definitely less intimidating, but it just takes time. And every single time it's just like, okay, so what tools are we going to have access to this time around? Because is it user Zoom? Is it user testing? Like, how are we going to do recruiting? Like, there's so much time just spent figuring out the research ops of the situation that it really kind of slows down the process up front. So I've been thinking about this a lot. There's some blockers from us being able to like have our own tools and stuff, but like just really kind of building out processes and stuff and all of the different, like what I can imagine as being different cases that we would find with a different client, so that we're prepared when those situations come around. Yeah, it's a real challenge because you don't know for sure. And I think kind of back to what was said previously, it makes it more difficult whenever you're junior and you're in a spot like that, because you don't know what you don't know. So just trying to stay humble and continue to grind and continue to learn, and just kind of ride the wave as it comes. But I think if you stick to that and just kind of keep your nose to the grindstone, then you'll find that you'll be prepared whenever the challenges come your way.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. We do kind of have a little extra time here. Megan is maybe going to send me some questions or ask them herself. Actually, I have one on my own, which just occurred to me. How much time outside of your jobs right now are all of you spending to kind of do that continuing education? Like, how much more are you reading books? Are you doing Figma tutorials? Like, how much time goes on outside of work hours to kind of keep up or feel like you're pulling your weight? Who wants to tackle that first?
I can jump in on that one. So I joined as an associate level or junior level role in my company. And one of the goals that I had set with my mentor my manager was actually set around that. And I told him, like, I want to continue to learn. I want to get more efficient at Figma, and I want to learn aspects of this piece. We actually embedded that into my goals. So I get to, depending on if my schedule allows, I have a little bit of room during work to where I can read and look things up and research and do Figma tutorials and things like that. And the way that we go about it is that's directly going to impact the way that I do my job. So I actually spend some weeks, not all weeks, but I get to spend a little bit of time during the week. And then outside of that, I'm constantly scrolling. LinkedIn is such a great resource. I see so many articles on there. That's where I found the book. So I'm constantly on there, usually just kind of in my free time. But most of the time I'm able to kind of do it on the job, which is kind of nice, because then I get a little bit of a break in the afternoon. Sure. Because there are some days I'm like, I don't want to think about UX today because it's been a long day, so.
How about you, Diana?
So I don't spend much time outside of work researching UX and UI. I do follow some UX UI accounts on Instagram and on LinkedIn, but I do believe that there should be like a strong boundary in like work and what you do outside, because I do think that you should take a break and explore other things in order to be a good designer. But because like advertisement and transit projects do come and go, your schedule is sometimes very floppity. So there are like days where maybe you just finish one thing and that's it for the day. And usually when that happens, that's when I am just like going through material or iOS design system and just like refreshing my knowledge. Or as I'm working on a project for my company, I just notice like certain things that I would like to improve. So I just like to make a note of that and just like research more on it during my free time. So that is like something I could like bring up to my manager or any other designers and just get their idea on it.
Okay, great. How about you, Chase?
Yeah, so we have a certain amount of time each week that's like built in for us to allocate towards what we call R&D, and just like research and development, which is really just kind of like our own like professional development and like building skills. And we're our design team, our research team, all of it is very young, like not just in age, but in like how long that has existed at this company. So some of these processes are still being built out, because I think Summer mentioned like having a lot of these goals like kind of built into your development plan. We're really trying to get there because it's super important to kind of like continue to give people a path forward on like how they can develop, because it's not so obvious like what it is that you need to learn. You know, we all learned so much going through the boot camp, and it's like, should I be refreshing things that I feel are a little fuzzy in my memory, or should I be diving into something completely new? And in these days, it seems like there's like 10 new AI tools that come out every single freaking day. So is that what I should be learning right now? For me, outside of just like the R&D time that I have at work, I find myself like I'm living and breathing UX all the time. And maybe this isn't the most healthy way to go about this. But I tend to bite off more than I can chew and kind of just deal with the consequences as they come. So like I'm flirting with trying to start my own company, and it's this really big, ambitious goal that seems silly to even talk about. But I think that if anybody is ever interested in doing that, if anything else, just as a thought experiment, I think it's a really good thing as a young UX person to do, is to imagine yourself in the role of a founder. And if you have the opportunities or resources in front of you to kind of pursue that, you don't necessarily have to dive in, sink your own money into it or anything. But I think that, you know, we learn our tech skills, our communication skills, all of the things under the like typical UX umbrella. But one thing that kind of gets like kind of left out, or it's just opaque from a junior designer or researcher's perspective, is how to develop business acumen. How do you think like a founder? Because those are the other stakeholders that you also need to have empathy for and to understand, because they're going to have a large influence on how you do your job and what you get to do. And I think that even just sort of like approaching it as a thought experiment, taking one of your, like maybe your capstone projects and thinking about like, how would you even actually launch this thing, can be illuminating and show you like what matters to those people and how difficult it actually is to get a company off the ground, and why it is maybe that they're going to say no to some of the things that you wish that you could do in your role, because it actually just isn't critical to the bottom line of the business. So that's changed my perspective on UX. I think I'm a little bit less idealistic and understand the constraints that we operate in a little bit more from having done that. So yeah, that's a long rambling answer, but I'm in UX all the time, like constantly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I kind of find that I will let myself get into things too much, and like I have to, because I appreciate the work-life balance that Diana talked about, but I'm really bad at it unless someone says stop. And I had a moment, actually, as we were preparing this panel about a week or two ago, where I'm standing in the kitchen, like my head just felt funny, and I was like, I am doing too much lately. And someone asked me, like, how do you do all these things? And I said, I don't know. Like, I need to do fewer things. So I'm with you there. I think it's like, but part of that I think is intriguing to me, because I like this work. I like doing these panels. I like creating and writing about UX. So like, this is the first time where like a career has felt like this was made for me. So I'm encouraged in that respect. And when you start your company, like I'll move to Joplin, Missouri, like I'm there. I'm sure like house prices are probably pretty low there, right? Like that's a good place to buy a house. Megan, want to chime in with some questions? We've got a little bit of time.
Yeah, so we might have already touched upon this from Summer's answer on working remotely, and Diana's and Chase's working, on site. But someone asked, can you share the differences you've noticed when working on site versus working remotely? And do you guys have anything to add about that, or?
I can start with this one. I think I can only really compare to the job that I had previously, which was always in person. And I think the biggest difference that I've noticed is just there's a lot less direct interaction, which sounds obvious, but what I mean is, like, when you're in an office, your coworker's right next door sometimes. So you can pop over and say, hey, can you mind looking at this really quick? Or, hey, I'm running into this barrier. And you're in person, which just allows for a lot more opportunity there, versus like when remote, it really truly relies on so much indirect communication. Of course, there's other barriers like technology, right? Those things have popped up sometimes, so that can kind of get in the way of important things. But I think really that's the biggest difference is when you're not in person, there's a lot more reliable, like you rely a lot more on some of that indirect communication and the tools outside of that. It's not as easy all of the time to necessarily like jump next door and say, hey, I'm having trouble with this. I think also having to be creative with brainstorming sessions. So we use a lot at my company, we use a lot of FigJam and Figma to even just brainstorm and map out things, because it's not as simple as like walking into the room and let's start writing on Post-it notes, right? So there's a lot of kind of creative differences there that we kind of have to work around, but. Yeah.
Okay, we'll toss
Yeah.
that over to Diana then. And I'm kind of curious off the bat, like, would you go remote tomorrow if they gave you the option?
Actually, I do have an option. I
Okay.
have hybrid, but I definitely do prefer working in person because I sit so close to the developers. If there's something I'm confused with, I can just walk over to them and ask. And I found that when I do work remotely, I don't really directly communicate with them as often. That is just because of the way our projects are structured. The design team just happens to be way ahead of the development team. Yeah, so when there's like not much going on, I'm not really getting to know them face to face. One thing that I will say, it is really helpful that I am working in person is because like my company, they deal with transportation and they deal with creating their own technology. A lot of the words that they use is just like things they just made up for the company itself. So there's a lot of jargon, and a lot of my time is just spent trying to understand what any of these words mean, because it's all tech that we made in-house. So there's no, like, I guess, real world reference to them.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. I do see we are coming up on time. I know Diana has a hard cutoff, so we will just axe the recording here. And I want to thank everyone for all the time they put into this tonight. Maybe a couple of us will stick around if there's any other questions, but thank you again for watching. The link will go out maybe tomorrow, and thank you again to everyone.